Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is History 101, Episode 25. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. War, Death, Trauma, and Philosophy. What philosophy tries to do is explain how the world works. How do people work in that world? Philosophy is science before science. And that's important to understand. The Greeks don't have the math. Nobody has the math to invent science as we understand it. So they try to understand the world using logic. You've done this in math class, right? If P, then Q kind of formulas. The idea was, if you can understand how the world works, you can understand the principles of that world. And philosophy is a reaction to the defeat in the Peloponnesian War. The three philosophers we're going to talk to are essentially Athenian. Socrates is an Athenian. Plato is an Athenian. Aristotle is not an Athenian, but he lives most of his life in Athens. And so this is a reaction to Athenian defeat. How could this happen? Philosophy is trying to understand how the world works. What kind of world could exist that Athens could lose? Well, that's a trauma. That's a response to a trauma. So we start with Socrates. Socrates fought in the Peloponnesian War, and he nearly died at Delium, in the Delium defeat against Thebes. So he believes in democracy. And what is the founding value of democracy? Equality. And so he believes knowledge is innate. He believes everybody has knowledge inside of them. All the knowledge you need. When we talk about knowledge, where is knowledge located? We mean all of the knowledge that you need. So he believes it's innate. It's part of you. It's inside of you. So how do you get it out? Because you don't know stuff. There are people who don't know things. But Socrates believes in democracy. He believes in equality. He fought for the democracy. So he believes in equality. So he believes everybody is innately the same. They have the knowledge. The problem people have is they can't get it out into the world. So the way you do that is the Socratic Method. Someone smarter than you asks you leading questions and goes step by step by step by step until you go, oh my God, I know what that is. Now, is he asking nuclear science, chemistry questions? No, they're big questions. What is truth? What is power? What is courage? And you go, well, I know what truth is. And I go, hold on a second. Do you really know what truth is? Because every December, we talk about a particular thing that may make you a liar. Maybe. Because do you tell the truth? Or do you indulge? Do you enjoy? Do you play along? All of those are lies. They're just different names for lies. But they're not telling the truth. They're not acting the truth. And think about how many people are engaging in that lie all at the same time. The malls, photographers, every other adult. They're all engaging in it. So what is the truth? And what is the lie? Is the truth the reality? Or is the truth what the society wants the truth to be? And that makes things much more complicated. And you'll notice I'm having a tough time doing this because I'm trying not to have spoilers. But we're dealing with these kind of complicated questions. What is courage? Oh, I know what courage is. Yeah, well, is running into a burning building to save a puppy courage? Or to save a baby courage? You go, yes, it is. Well, what if the person has nothing to lose? What if their wife has left them? What if they're bankrupt? What if they're about to be arrested for embezzling, pain medicine from old people? What if they have nothing to lose? Isn't courage bravery in the face of knowing you have something to lose? And that's what Socrates is asking. These kind of big questions where you go, oh, I know what the answer is. And you go, do you really? Think about it. So what does he think about democracy? We've already kind of talked about it because it's obvious at the start. He believes in democracy. He believes in equality. Why? He fought for it. And it shows in his philosophy. Everyone is capable of being as smart as Socrates. Everybody. Everybody has it in them. It is innate. So the last thing that we need to know about Socrates is his death and how important his death is. Socrates is betrayed by the parents of his students who didn't like what they came home. His students came home and said, Mom, Dad. Well, he was teaching, older kids, but they got, Mom, Dad, guess what I learned? And the parents went, what? I don't agree with that at all. And if you've ever been a teacher or you know teachers, you know you will run into these people. I have had students or parents of students try to get me fired for everything from, quote, teaching the Bible wrong to, quote, not giving enough A's. So, what are you going to do? If you're a teacher, you're always going to upset somebody. And so what happened, though, is with Socrates, it became a political thing. The parents caused a ruckus. Other people joined in, and it became a thing. Socrates became the bad guy on Twitter for a day. And they had a trial. Is Socrates poisoning the minds of the youth? Is this a problem for the culture of Athens? And they had a trial. You could read Plato's apologia, which apology does not mean I'm sorry. That's the Christian take on the word. For the Greeks, apology means an explanation. It's the Christians who are so guilty in their souls that they are sinful people that they took the Greek word, meaning an explanation, and added to feel sorry for, an explanation for what bad things you did. The assumption is you did the bad things. But the Greeks don't have that. It just means to explain. An explanation. So the most famous painting of Socrates' death is this. Jean-Louis David's 1787, The Death of Socrates. It is currently in the Met in New York City. You could go and see it. And you see this. Socrates is in the middle. He's buff. He's 72 and he's ripped. And he's giving his last lecture. What has happened is he has been found guilty of betraying Athens, the city he fought for. And he is sentenced to die. Now, in Greece, they didn't just haul you off and cut your head off like they would do in England to Henry VIII's wives. They let you have a couple weeks to get your affairs in order. And you go, well, why? Why isn't there a prison? Well, one, prisons are expensive, and two, where are you running away to? The mountains of Greece? If you go in exile, you might as well be dead. You can't go into the mountains of Greece, and you can't be a citizen in any other city. So you got your affairs in order, and so Socrates, and the other point is, they didn't actually want to kill you. They didn't want to cut your head off if they could avoid it. I mean, there are times when they do, and they're like, but they'd rather you kill yourself. It was more honorable. And it saved you the embarrassment of having to be hauled through the streets to the place where you're going to have your head cut off, crying, peeing yourself. It was, you did it in your own home, you took care of it, and everyone moved on. You were buried by your family with dignity, your body intact. The Romans believed the same thing. The Romans would do the same thing. Like, they would go and murder you, but there was also hey, we're going to come and murder you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Just saying. Just saying we're coming for you. And you could flee, but there's nowhere really to go. And so men would go, they'd take care of their business, drink some poison or stab themselves in the intestines, and that's what happened. So what we have is Socrates doing his last lecture about truth and knowledge, and his students are crying, and one student is handing him a cup, and that cup is full of hemlock. That cup is full of poison. Socrates is not ashamed. Socrates is not bowed. Socrates is not sorry. Socrates is empowered. Now, here's the interesting thing. There's an old man in gray in the left, and that is Plato. And there is an analysis of this, that the scene, because Plato is not looking at this, and Plato is old, that this is a memory. This is Plato's memory of Socrates' death, which would make sense because Socrates didn't write anything down. Everything we know about Socrates comes from his students, especially Plato, but also Xenophon. And so Plato is remembering this image that's behind him of the death of Socrates. So what do we get from his death? One, he's dying for truth. He is not bowed. Athens is trying to silence his knowledge. They're trying to silence his voice, and he's saying, no. You may kill me, but you will not destroy my truth. And the second thing is, Plato is traumatized by this. So we come to Plato. Plato is a student and a friend of Socrates. So what does that mean? That means his philosophy will be fairly similar. It will have a lot in common. Plato is telling us about Socrates. He uses Socrates in his own books. But, and it's a big but he's mad that Socrates is dead, and he's angry at Athens and the Athenian democracy that did it. So it's not going to be the same, because Plato is not going to believe that knowledge is innate. Why? Because the Athenian democracy had the chance to side with Socrates, to save Socrates. And what did they choose to do? Murder him. They murdered his friend. They murdered the person he thought was the smartest man around. How could they be smart people to have done so? And so does he like democracy? No, he doesn't like democracy. He thinks democracy is dumb. It is full of dumb people. He thinks people are dumb. So allowing dumb people to make dumb decisions is a dumb philosophy, is a dumb government. These people are idiots. So then where is knowledge? If it's not innate, if it's not inside of you, where is it? It's in the ether. What's the ether? The ether is a place that you cannot go, taste, touch, or experience. It is a place so far away that no matter how far you travel, you will never get there. And what's in that place? The perfect form of a thing. Now that should sound familiar, because St. Augustine will use this in the 400s AD. So 700 years later, St. Augustine, the Christian bishop, will write a book called The City of God, and he will use Plato to invent our concept of heaven. Now, if you're a Christian, a Catholic, if you're Jewish or a Muslim, and I ask you, what is heaven like? Go ahead, write me down your idea of heaven. Whatever that idea of heaven is awesome. It's a place with no dogs, but only puppies. It's a place where you always hit a hole in one, where you always get the 7 a.m. tea time. Is a place where the air conditioning in the movie theater is a perfect 68 degrees and the speaker systems are never too loud. It is perfect. It is awesome. It is great. Well, why? Why do you have that concept of heaven? That heaven is not in the Bible. It's not the Jewish heaven. And to be fair, I said, if you're Jewish, you may think this, but you probably don't, to be fair. I mean, you may, but it's a Christian philosophy. It's the Christian take on the Jewish ideas. And that's St. Augustine. St. Augustine in the 400s was faced with the fall of Rome. And people came to him and they said, Augustine, what do we do? Rome is falling. What do we do? And he said, don't worry about Rome. Worry about heaven. And they said, what is that like? All I know is I read my New Testament and people say it's great. Jesus is there. Okay, but what happens there? Do I just stare at Jesus forever? I mean, I'm sure that's probably cool, but what is heaven like? Because I'm scared. And so St. Augustine goes, well, have you read your Plato? And the people look at him like he's crazy and they go, we're Romans. Of course we've read our Plato. What are you thinking? Come on, Augustine. And he says, well, you know how he says out there someplace is a place that you can't taste, touch, or experience where everything is perfect? That's heaven. Now, Plato will write this in the book called The Republic, where he creates the perfect form of government. Notice he's retconning, right? The democracy has killed Socrates. So what is he going to do? Retcon government. He's going to create a perfect form of government. And who's in charge of the perfect form of government? Smart people. Tough people are in the army. Smart people are running the government. That everyone has the job akin to their personal nature. So here's the thing, though. What does that make reality? What does it make us? It makes us, and this is a part that's like Socrates, it makes everyone striving. That out there is a perfect circle. Let's do this for an example, right? Think about it. Think about it in your mind and then draw a circle. Don't just draw one big circle. Just do it in one thing. Don't get a compass. Don't go inch by inch by inch. Just do it. And how does it look? Does it look like, well, the one that's more of an oval than a circle? But does it have a comb over? Does it look like the ones that are drawn by the little kids in the blue and the pink if you're watching the video? What does it look like? And the question becomes is, how did you know what you were supposed to draw? How did you know what a circle is supposed to look like? How do you know it's not supposed to look like that? This pyramid with 3 sides. Why didn't you draw that? How did you know when I said, think about it and then draw a circle? What did you think about in your mind? And the question is, when you thought about it in your mind, why didn't you draw what was in your mind? So let's go through those questions. Like, what you saw in your mind. The question is, where did that come from? Now you're going to go, well, it's a perfect circle. Well, you've never seen a perfect circle. Perfect circles literally cannot exist. Why? Because to draw a perfect circle, you must use imperfect instruments. You must use yourself, your body. You must use a pencil or a pen. Well, that pencil or pen was made by an imperfect person of materials that are imperfect, right? The lead in your pencil is not perfect. It's lead in the pencil. It's made by people who are imperfect. And so a circle is a line where every dot is equidistant from every other dot on the line. That doesn't exist. Doesn't exist anywhere. In fact, the earth is not a circle. People draw a circle for the earth. It's not. It bulges. There is no perfect circle in nature. So why do we think of a perfect circle? Where does that even idea come from? And what Plato is saying is it must exist. A perfect circle has to exist for you to have an idea of a perfect circle. And what that means is when you see it in your mind's eye, you are tapping into the ether. And then when you draw it, you are trying to replicate what you see in the ether. And now if I asked you to draw 3 circles, I would bet each one would be a little bit better. And this is the part that's like Socrates. You're aspiring. You can get better. That's what Plato is talking about. That everything aspires to become more like the thing that's perfect. Since there is perfection. I mean, think about it. How many of you have dated someone who's worse than the person you just broke up with? Right? And I don't mean like one date. I mean like a year. You shouldn't, right? You know that. Every person you date should be better for you than the last person you just broke up with. Otherwise, why did you break up with that person? And why would you go out with the new person? If you're sitting there going, wow, this person's worse than my ex, right? Why would you do that to yourself? So you're aspiring, you are moving towards, but why do you keep breaking up with people? What are you hoping to find? And what Plato would say is that there's some idea in your mind of a perfect boyfriend, of a perfect girlfriend. Now, if you're a Christian, that perfect boyfriend and girlfriend is Jesus. Now, don't get hung up on the gender. Jesus is the perfect person. Because Jesus is God, and God is Jesus. And so he does everything correctly. So does Jesus cuddle the proper amount of time? Yes. Does Jesus say the right things after you've made creme brulee? Yes. Don't get hung up on gender. Because the aspects of Jesus are the perfect part. But that's aspiration. You're always trying to be more like what's in the ether. Now let's go with the next question. Why didn't you draw this 3-sided thingy? I asked you to draw a circle, and you probably all drew a round thingy. Why didn't you draw a pointy 3-sided thingy? And the answer is, someone smarter than you told you. They told you those were bad circles. They told you that 3-sided thingy is not a circle, it's a triangle. And when you did that on a test, they put a big red mark on it and told you were wrong and you felt dumb. And they went, ha, 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 ha. And all the kids were like, that's a triangle. Or are you stupid or something? And you felt even worse. But someone smarter than you told you this is a circle. And this is a triangle. And then they enforced it. Well, here's the question. How did that person know? How did that person who's smarter than you know what a circle is supposed to be? What a triangle is? Well, somebody must have told them. Well, who told them? Somebody must have told them. But at the beginning of time, there must have been somebody who went, that's a circle, and that's a triangle. That person must have been tied into, jacked into, like Neo in the Matrix, to the ether. Because they said, that's a circle. Where did that idea come from? A circle must exist. That's what Plato's argument is. Just like Socrates is arguing that knowledge is inside of you and you just have to get it out for you to be smarter, to be more whole. For Plato, knowledge is in the ether. And so that thing must exist for you to have the idea of it. Aristotle thought Plato was full of shit. There's not a better way of saying it. Aristotle was a student of Plato. He was Plato's best student. And he thought Plato was full of shit. In fact, Aristotle's going to spend the rest of his career telling you just how wrong Plato is about stuff. And this is going to set the terms for Western philosophy, for basically till today, of which is more correct, Plato and his idea of perfection. Religions are going to love that one. Right? Islam, Christianity, they base God on that. But science is going to be for Aristotle. So since he dislikes Plato, what does that mean? It means his philosophy will be very different. He thinks Plato is wrong. So let's start with, first of all, it's Aristotle who wins. This is why he becomes the basis for science, or I shouldn't say the basis for science. He becomes the basis of knowledge in the medieval world that science has to deal with. Science has to figure out a way of telling people Aristotle is wrong without insulting Aristotle, because no one would buy it. Because he becomes, of the three of them, Aristotle becomes the one who wins all bets. If Aristotle is basically considered to be the smartest man who ever lived. If he said it, it was right, and you just didn't argue it. He gets called the philosopher. When you read medieval stuff and it's like, the philosopher said, that's Aristotle. And you're just done. He's just the philosopher. And if he said it, it was right. So he's considered smart. So what does he say? He says, you can find knowledge through examination and observation, which is the opposite of Plato. Plato thinks you're stupid. And Plato is saying someone smarter will tell you what you need to know. Aristotle says, you're capable of finding it out. In fact, Aristotle goes kind of back to Socrates. Not the whole way, and that's a major difference, but he goes kind of back to Socrates, where he goes, you can figure it out. You can go and you can see it. See, Socrates you still needed someone smarter than you to help pull out the knowledge. For Plato, that smarter person told you the knowledge. For Aristotle, you could figure it out yourself. You want to know how a river works? Go look at a river. You want to know how a marriage works? Go look at a good marriage. Everything will have principles in it. A good river will have 5 aspects. Aristotle would have written for BuzzFeed. He would have written listicles for BuzzFeed. 10 things you need in your new Oscar movies, in your Oscar performance. That's Aristotle. Aristotle literally did that, by the way. He wrote the Poetics, which is basically the first how to write lecture. And it has like 10 principles that all good plays, all good stories have to have. And it's still true. The stuff he has, if you get Masterclass and you spend $200 and you get the playwrights and you get Aaron Sorkin, they all tell you, just read Aristotle. Just read his Poetics, start there, and he'll tell you how to write well. And you realize all the things you're missing. But how do you know? Go and watch good plays. Go and watch good movies. Stephen King will tell you, you want to be a good writer? You have to read a lot to be a good writer. Why? Because you have to read good stuff and bad stuff so that you know why something is bad and you know why something is good. Examination and observation, which means you go out into nature. It's not found in the books. It's found through experience. You go out and you see it. You go out and you experience it. It is all around you. So Socrates, knowledge is inside of you. Plato, knowledge is so far away from you, you can't touch it. But Aristotle is knowledge is all around you. It's like Christmas. It's all around you. Nature's all around us. I feel it in my bones. And Aristotle is why science is science. Science has to be right 100% of the time. Otherwise, people in 1500 assumed Aristotle was right. So science had to prove Aristotle wrong. To prove Aristotle wrong, science had to create the scientific methodology. It had to create experimentation. It has to be right. For science to be science, it has to be right. If it's not right 100% of the time, repeatable, replicable, it's not science. It's what we would call magic. It's something that happens, but you can't rely on it. You don't know why it happens. It just does. Now, what about democracy? I don't have it written down, but we can add in democracy. Well, Aristotle is okay with democracy. He doesn't think it's great, but he thinks it can be possible. It can be good. Why? Because of people. Because people can choose to be smart, but people can also choose to not be smart. They could choose to be ignorant. Plato thinks they're dumb. They are incapable of knowledge. Aristotle thinks people are ignorant. They choose to be dumb. That's a huge difference. Aristotle still believes in people like Socrates did. He hasn't given up on people. Plato has. So Aristotle thinks, well, democracy is made by men. Men are flawed. But if you have enough good people, it could be a good system. It's complicated, but it's possible to be good. Democracy is possible with good people, but people have to work at it. People have to choose to be good. So Aristotle is the basis on which science becomes science, because science has to prove Aristotle wrong in the 1500s, and everyone thought Aristotle was right. And that's philosophy. So, in summation, Socrates believed in democracy. He thought knowledge was inside of you. Plato, traumatized by Socrates' death, hates people, thinks people are dumb, thinks democracy is dumb, and so believes knowledge is away from you. It's in the ether. It's far away. Aristotle thinks Plato is wrong and goes back towards Socrates. He thinks people are capable of knowledge. They go out into nature and they observe it and they could figure it out. He's got confidence in people. The problem for Aristotle is people don't always choose knowledge. They choose ignorance because it's easier. It's easier not to know. It's easier not to go to the river. It's easier not to write down all your observations. It's easier not to categorize everything. It's easier to go and ask your brother, how does a river work? So people are ignorant. Socrates fought for a democracy. He believed in it. Plato hates the democracy because it murdered Socrates. And Aristotle is, democracy's okay. It's not great because people are not great. But it's not evil either. It's capable of good things. But it's got limitations. So that's our philosophy in summation. The Christians, religion, Islam will love Plato. Science is based off of Aristotle. And teaching, I do it in my classrooms, is a lot of Socratic. It's trying to pull answers out of somebody because you know they're capable of it. The worst words for a teacher to hear, they're for me. I tell students in the first day, do not say these words to me. I don't know. I would never ask you a question you couldn't possibly answer. But I'm going to tell you that if you answer my 3 questions, honestly, you'll find out you know more than you think. But you have to trust. You have to have a relationship. It takes time. It's slow. Whereas mass teaching is Platonic. You sit in a classroom, a teacher writes on the board and says, study this. It's names and dates in terms of history, right? Study this, study this, study this. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Done. Know it. That's Platonic. And you get Montessori schools, which is Aristotelian. You go and you experiment. You show up and you go, teacher, I want to know why pyramids don't fall down. And the teacher will say, go find out. Go figure it out. Then let's build a pyramid using the blocks. And you go, okay, we'll figure this out. That's Aristotelian. So different teaching methods, different schools, different levels of schools, different classes of school. And the more rich you are, the more private, the more alone time you have, one-on-one time with a professor or a teacher or a mentor, you see it. You go from Platonic, where they tell you what you need to know, to Aristotelian, where you can go and play around and experience it, to Socratic, where it's pulled out of you, where you're engaging. You go, oh, I knew it all along. All right. So I know I put my summary into the thank you. So be safe. Take care. Good luck. See you soon.